Awesome. All right, great. Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Gerald Tang. I am the Executive Director of Career Services and Internship Program here at Bridgewater State University. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to Dr. Kelly Duggan, which is a alum of Bridgewater State University, owner and president of Physical Therapy U here, located here in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. So I'm so excited to chat with you to learn more about your experience, Kelly. Welcome to the space and appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate that. So for today's format, we're going to be, I'm facilitating a few Q&A, and students and colleagues in the room, feel free to type in any questions in the chat. My colleagues, Katie, will be filtering some questions in, and we'll have some time at the end for any Q&A for you, for us to kind of ask you questions as well. So I just want to mention that, the formality of today's sessions. Kelly, I always like to start with some random questions first, if that's okay with you, to warm us up before we come into it. So this is a set of questions that have no right or wrong answer, just whatever gut instinct tells you. Okay. Give you an example. Apples or orange?
Apples.
Okay. So let's just keep going. Dunkin's or Starbucks?
Duncan.
Okay. All right. Britney Spears or Beyonce?
Oh, wow. Beyonce.
Okay. Biology or chemistry?
Biology.
Okay. Let's see. Toyota or Ford?
Ford. I have a Bronco.
Okay. Good to know. I would say pasta or pizza?
Pasta.
Pasta. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Good to know. No judgment here.
I feel a little judgment from Dan.
That's okay. I love both. I love both pasta and pizza, so it wouldn't matter to me. Just give it to me as long as it's free, right?
Yeah. There you go.
So a little bit warm up here, get to know you a little bit. So thank you. I will start with a few questions. Kelly, you has been someone that I always want to chat with because your interesting background, being a BSU alum, move on to graduate schools, pursuing your PT degrees, and now really open a business, expanding a business during this time. Love to have this conversation with you all. So I will start off by just asking you, what was your major at Bridgewater State University, and sort of what sparks you to even think about healthcare career pathway?
Sure. So my major at Bridgewater State was physical education. At the time, they had an individualized study major. I have known I wanted to get into physical therapy from a really young age. I actually didn't start out at Bridgewater State. I actually started out at Northeastern in their physical therapy program. But I was there for about a year and a half. I really did not enjoy my time there. I didn't feel like I fit in at that university. I just it wasn't comfortable for me, and I knew I was going to be there for a long haul. The physical therapy program was 6 years. And so I started to look at other options. Looked at Bridgewater. Everybody said, don't do it because it's really hard to get into a PT program. They're like, you're already in one, don't leave. But I just couldn't see myself finishing out or starting my career at the college that I was at. So I transferred into Bridgewater with the intention of, I'll get all my prereqs done and then I'll apply to graduate school and I'll try physical therapy at a different type school. So I transferred in January. And from the start, I just had an absolutely fantastic, supportive relationship. Even from my initial outreach of, is this a school that I want to kind of have this journey at? Just felt really supported in having this sort of outside the box, non-traditional way of doing what I wanted to do for my career. So that was sort of what drew me into Bridgewater. It was local, it was smaller, and I just felt so much support in that community.
That's awesome. When you were at Bridgewater, did you involve in any organizations, or I'm assuming you have done internship? Can you share a bit more about what was your involvement and how do you sort of navigate that transition being a transfer student?
Sure. So initially, I was not a physical education. Well, I was a physical education major. I had an athletic training sort of subset. So I got linked in with an internship for physical therapy rehab aid doing that, which was really turned into a job. So it wasn't really an internship at that point. I was living off campus and I was also working at a minimum of 20 hours a week at the time, being a transfer student and taking all of my prereqs so that I could still graduate in 4 years and get into PT school so I wouldn't fall behind my peers there. So I wasn't in any clubs. I wasn't in any fun additional activities because like I really didn't have a lot of extra time. But I did have a rehab aid position that was acquired sort of through the university. Athletic training kind of set me up for that path. And then from there, I switched to that individualized study major.
That's awesome. And you mentioned about early on, you knew that you wanted to be in PT. Sort of what sort of makes you decide and say, yep, this is really what I want to do? Is that experience that kind of help you confirm and validate your interest? Have you ever questioned that? I don't know, I want to do PT anymore.
Uh, no. So yeah, I definitely I shadowed some PTs and OTs in high school, and just being in that environment, I was like, this is for sure what I want to do. I questioned it a little bit when I was at Northeastern. You know, it's a long road ahead when you're still a freshman, and it's a lot of money invested in order to do that. So I definitely questioned it all along, but with my rehab aid positions, with my shadowing, every time I was in the environment of physical therapy for internship or shadowing or an actual job, um, you know, it was fun and it was exciting, and I was for sure, this is what I want to do. One of the part-time jobs that I had while I was working in school was kind of the opposite of that. I worked at a major corporation, you know, in like a print shop room where I was creating files and then delivering those files to various cubicles throughout this massive facility. And that sort of for me was like, well, I don't want to be in, I don't want to have a cubicle. I don't want to be sitting all day. I want to be out. I want to be with people. I want to be physical. So all of those sort of job experiences kind of continued to push me in that direction of physical therapy.
That's awesome. So as you were thinking about pursuing your, as you were thinking about pursuing your education at Bridgewater State and PT, PT school is a long journey. Can you share a bit about what is it like to be in PT school? What are some of the challenges? What something that you wish you would known when you were in PT
Oh,
school?
hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Um, yeah, what's something I wish I knew when I was in PT school? Um, I think the biggest challenge was academically. It's a lot of hard work, and everybody that's in school with you is really smart. So even if you're like, oh, I'm pretty smart, you're not. And you go to PT school, and like it was like clear, like, oh, okay, like no, these people are like intense. So that was difficult to manage. I remember interviewing, and I was in line with people for like the initial interview process, and people started sharing their GPAs, and I was like, oh my God, like I can't, this is not it. I'm like, this is too much for me. But luckily I did not leave the line. And I stayed with my GPA, and I applied. But yeah, it was the sort of academic environment. You know, again, I felt super supported at Bridgewater. I felt supported at my graduate school that I went to, but it definitely was a very different academic environment where there were certain standards and professionalism, and they just kind of, it was very rigid. So that was difficult kind of mentally to get through. And I wish during school and during that time, I sort of was able, and I tell students this all the time, I wish I had picked my head up for a second to kind of look outward and maybe not just at my institution, at what the physical therapy career was and other PTs that were doing things, instead of just kind of in this little silo of my PT school and my PT professors and in the PTs that they knew. The physical therapy world is, people are doing really cool and interesting things. But when you're in graduate school, it's such a heavy academic load, and there's such a heavy pressure that goes with that, that I think it was just really intense. So I'm glad to get through it. I took my last test and I said, I'm never taking a test again. And then I started a job at a hospital and they were like, oh, you have to take a HIPAA and an OSHA test and all these other tests. So I was like, oh no, I thought I was done. But apparently it never ends. But yeah, that's what I would say is and I say that to students all the time, like when you're in it, it feels really heavy. But just if you can pick your head up and kind of look outward, outside of your little school bubble, that's really helpful and motivating.
And obviously you're smart because you passed and you complete the entire program, right? So the imposter symptom,
Yeah.
always come up and resurface up at some point throughout our career for sure. But I love what you just share about the notions of just kind of like take a step back and look at what else is around you and what's happening in the space around you and explore those possibilities. It's definitely great advice. Share with us a little bit about after graduation. Now you completed the degree, you say you work in a hospital. How did that venture into your own career or your own company?
Yeah. So graduated, I worked in a few different environments. I always, if someone asked me 10 years ago, would you open your own PT clinic? I would be like, oh my God, I would never do that. Never. That was not for me. It wasn't in the cards. I had no interest until, things changed enough for me that I was like, oh, maybe I could do it. So, I worked in rehab hospital. I worked in home care for a while. I did some part-time work at a skilled nursing facility. And then I worked in multiple outpatient clinics, rehab-based and private practice. I think health healthcare is difficult because there are a lot of expectations, and I also had a couple kids, and when I was pregnant with my third, I started to look at like, wow, this is really expensive. Children are really expensive. My school loans aren't going anywhere, and now I have to work more and more. So instead of a 40-hour week, it was, a 50 plus with additional jobs and that sort of stuff. So I had to start to think in jobs that I didn't want to do. I was working at a skilled nursing facility. I was doing home care. That was not my passion. My passion has always been outpatient, sports and orthopedics, but that doesn't pay. So I was working at a nursing home and doing home care because that pays much better. And so it was really frustrating to think like I'm working for all of this, but it's, you know, uh, all I'm doing is adding more hours onto my schedule. And what could I do so that I could control some of my own schedule? Because when you work at a hospital, you're working weekends, you're working holidays, and that sort of stuff too. So that's what kind of started to lead me towards, well, if I did my own practice, I could work with the exact population that I want to work with. I could work with them how I wanted to work with them, because there's a lot of regulations and restrictions when you work for a hospital. And then I would also have more time with my kids. Like if I wanted to go to a school event, I could because it would be my choice. And I didn't have to ask permission for that. So all those things started to kind of pile up for me. And then I finally was kind of like, 9 months pregnant. I'm like, I think I'm going to try it for a year. And I think my husband was probably horrified and terrified of me being 9 months pregnant with our third child, that he was like, yeah, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do. So I did it and it went really well. And yeah, that was kind of the start of all of it.
That's great. Well, working mom, first of all, kudos to you juggling multiple priorities. And you say you're starting your business while you're pregnant. I don't know how people do it. I certainly admire all your hard work that pour into PTU for sure during that time. Talk to us a bit about the journey. Starting a business on its own is already a lot of work. Now you are obviously juggling families, lives, and other life and paying the bill at the same time. Was it scary for you to start your own business? Share with us about what is that experience is like in the first couple of months into your beginnings of your ownership of a company.
Sure. Yeah, it was terrifying, right? So we took out our 401k. You have to pay for this stuff. We didn't have any money, so it's like, how do we do this? Let's cash this out and hope this works out. You put a lien against your house so you can get a loan. It was terrifying because if it didn't work out, now you just kind of put a lot of hours in and a lot of money in for something that wasn't successful. So from the beginning for me, I I had my son on January 13th. And by the end of January, I had signed a lease and I incorporated my company. We got that rolling by March and we opened in April. And yeah, it was kind of like I sacrificed a lot of time when my children were really, really little to make something work. And so once I kind of acknowledged, oh my God, okay, I didn't really take a maternity leave. I did. I just did it all with like, the kids in my lap and stuff. But I was like, I didn't want it to fail because I had sacrificed so much time of my children's lives. So that was what was on the line of like, you can't get that back. I could get money back. I could work a couple extra jobs. We could figure that out. But it was kind of the time that I had risked with my kids when they were so young. So that first year was just a lot of, it's a lot of the same of what I'm doing now, just on a smaller scale. But, every minute was filled. So my husband, I'd get home from work, say goodnight to the kids. My husband would put them to bed and I'd be on the computer for a couple hours. I remember I was so excited because I was able to purchase a laptop that had a light up keyboard so that I could continue to do work even when it was kind of nighttime for the kids and I could sit in their room and I could sit and do work and still see my keyboard. So it's kind of stuff like that that really sort of, there was no option for failure at that point because again, it wasn't just my pride, it wasn't just my money, it was time with my kids, which is incredibly invaluable. So I didn't want that to be at a loss. I knew if I made it successful, that eventually I would have more time and all of that independence and autonomy to do, what I wanted with my kids. So that was sort of the driving force behind that.
Wow, I mean, first of all, I gotta love the grit that I can see here from you about that resiliency and trying to make things work, preparing for the future, even though you are in your maternity time, building your own business and still trying to figure things out for the organization. So I know that PTU is a successful business. I'll publicly on record say that it is a successful business. Talk to us a bit about where you feel like that momentum starting to shift into like, yeah, this is now becoming a really good business model that we want to move forward. Have you ever experienced that? And I know that you're growing. Share with us about like what point you starting to think about, I can do more than one locations. I can now expand my
Sure.
business. I'm in good place.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share this. I've shared this publicly before too. I think it's important. Um, you know, Prior to COVID, um, this was a business, right? I was taking it very seriously, but I wasn't really looking like 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And what does this mean for me? And what does this mean for my family? And then COVID happened. And like I told you, I sacrificed a lot of time when my kids were young, creating and building this business. And with COVID, I watched it start to slip through my fingers. And I thought, and 2019 into 2020 was sort of the first shift where I stopped treating as much and I was getting more time with my kids and I had more time off. And COVID happened and I was like, oh my God, it's gonna be gone because I only had one location. And I watched a lot of my colleagues who had multiple clinics navigate this crisis very different. I was playing Jenga and they were playing chess. And I was like, wow, like I'm about to watch everything go because, I didn't want to force my employees to work during a time that was really scary for them. So we kind of shut down. But colleagues were kind of like, well, I'll move this person that place and I'll just shut down that one clinic and we'll shift these people here. And then they were playing a very different game than I was. And so it was at that point that I was like, okay, we have to make this work. And then when we come out of this, um, we need to look at it differently. So I need a stronger foundation on the business. And so I started to look into what does that mean for us. And then, it indicated having a second location. And the third location really only happened because we had a fantastic employee and we had a fantastic location that we could build. And all the cards kind of aligned for that third location. So that's where that came from. It came from taking off my this is a fun business PT/mom hat and putting on my like serious business hat and being like, okay, what does this have to be be successful 5, 10, 15 years down the line, and not only successful but resilient.
Wow, that's great. We're speaking of COVID, right? COVID changed many industry in so many ways, and sadly, some industry continue to be impacted by COVID and in the ripple effect of COVID, right? Can you share a bit about how do you sort of navigate this journey? What are some of the things that you feel like COVID now truly impacting the PT world, and if so, in what way?
Yeah. So like I said, we had shut down pretty early. It impacted us pretty severely. Um, we continued treating and we did telehealth. So a lot of companies were like, oh, boom, we're going to use Zoom. We're going to do telehealth. So we did that. Um, and we, still continue to do a form of that. It was just kind of COVID really forced us to look at different revenue sources. PT, you only get paid when the patient's in front of you. So, what else can we do to expand our reach to our patients if they can't physically be here? So, we started to look at what do we sell for products? Do we want to sell more of that? We started doing more strength and conditioning work. We have an app now that we use. So it really, again, COVID forced us to kind of look at different avenues for revenue, um, so that we could have that stronger foundation that I was talking about.
That's
Yeah.
great. That's great. Now you have an app, you have a telehealth option, you have the in-persons options. As a business owner, how do you juggle kind of the ongoing demand of we should try this new thing, to try this new thing, to try this new thing mentality to kind of stay competitive in your world? How and kind of what secret did you use any resources that you recommend people to consider? How did you sort of navigate those?
Mm,
We got to try something new next time because you don't know what the next COVID, hopefully, knock on wood, not happening, but
mm.
any other ongoing challenges coming at you. So how do you keep resilience, stay resilient?
Yeah. So I'm gonna answer that. I'm going to answer the second thing that you just said
Yeah,
first. So also with COVID, we have a lot of like standard operating procedures, and we had a SOP, standard operating procedure binder for things that would happen. But we didn't have, I'm going to say, an oh shoot binder. And after COVID, we were like, oh my God, we need an oh shoot binder. Like if there's a flood, here's what we do. If somebody, passes away, here's what we do. If there's a fire, here's what we do. If aliens come down, here's what we do. So COVID was one of those things that we were like, this could never happen, and then it did. So after COVID, we started to really look at, but what if, and then having kind of a plan for those what if scenarios. Um, so that's that kind of that part of it. And then, we're always looking at what's gonna be better for our patients and employees. So we're constantly in a improvement process. We meet all the time about it. We always say, how can we do better? How can we be better? We don't want to be stagnant because we always want to stand out. And then as PTs, we're all research based, we're all evidence based. So everything that we look at, we kind of then get nerdy with, and we're like, well, what does that mean historically? And, then we kind of go into that realm of it and really like nerd out. But yeah, that's kind of how we bring things on and decide if we're going to move forward with them or not. But I'm always open to any ideas that any employee brings to us, whether it's a therapist or or a rehab aide, an intern. Hey, I found this thing. What do you think? And then we consider it and we look into it, and if it fits and it's something we can manage, we definitely try to do that.
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Let's wrap this up with this one question. Then we're going to transition to you being a owner, you now being potential employer, what you look for, and so on. We're going to talk about it in just a second. But what's the biggest lessons learned from you as a
Mm.
business owner? If you're looking back this journey between 2024, dated back when the beginning of your PTU business, what
Yeah.
would that be?
Uh, standing in your values, I think is really important no matter what's happening around you. And just kind of leaning into those. for support. A major lesson that I learned is that I'm not very good with boundaries, and I don't know how to say no. So I don't have advice, but it's very clear to me that I do have an issue with that, I think if I could talk to myself back in 2015 or 2016, I would kind of tell myself to read more on, how to structure your day a little bit better so that it all doesn't all bleed together. But, I don't regret what I've done. And yeah.
And follow up on that, if there's a students coming to you right now, I'm graduating at Bridgewater State University, I'm now ready to start my own business. What advice do you have for that student?
Yeah, use as many resources as you can. Reading, listening to audiobooks, podcasts, searching online, traditional books, um, reaching out to other business owners. For me, it was really important before I opened my business that I reached out to other moms that also owned businesses, because I was like, am I going to be able to live with myself if I do this, knowing that, this is really going to flip the script on how much time I have with my kids. So I reached out to probably, 5 or 6 other moms that owned businesses. I think 2 or 3 got back to me, and then we had conversations. But I also think, understanding that, when you are reaching out to people, that a large percentage aren't going to get back to you. And it's not that they're purposely trying to ignore you or anything like that, and not to take anything personal, but just to keep reaching out to people, and extending your reach and extending your knowledge as best you can in that way, and not trying to be independent and just figuring it out on your own, because the answers are out there and a lot of them are out there for free. So
That's awesome. And you mentioned about podcasts. I heard that you have a podcast. Can you share more about what the podcast is about from you?
yeah. So it's not active right now. We've done 2 seasons of it. It's the Health and Fitness Connector. We would interview local other health and fitness businesses, doctors, physicians, gym owners, yoga instructors, nurses. And we would just try and make a better connection between physical therapy and whatever that next step was. So the podcast was really helpful for me to learn a lot of the people in my area, but also it was a fantastic resource for our patients. We would do interviews with surgeons to talk about, an ACL replacement or the different types of knee replacements. And so then when we would be in the gym talking to a patient and they had a question about, biomedicine or something, we could be like, oh, actually, we interviewed a doctor about that, and we have a fantastic podcast. And it would help to kind of build that relationship for that patient with the company or the doctor, so that they could have a feeling of, I kind of know this person now, I feel safe, and now I'm going to make an appointment. Or, wow, that gym's really interested, and I was always nervous to go in there, but now I feel like I know the owner and I'm more comfortable with it, and then I'm going there. So again, it was just, we were trying to make these connections for our patients just so that we could make it easier for people.
That's awesome. That's such what a good way to kind of highlight your own business, but also making connections with others and amplifying local businesses through your podcast. So sounds like you need to hire an intern to help you restart the podcast piece. But speaking of interns, I'm curious, you have take on many Bridgewater State intern along with other university in the area, or even across the nation.
Mhm.
As a hiring manager, as a business owner, let's jump into a few questions related to the hiring and the overall experiences. I'll start with one of the questions on the chat. Like, how many interns do you typically take on either the summer or throughout the year?
Yeah, so I would say it's anywhere from 2 to 4. I would say the last couple semesters we've had 4 interns at a time. Again, if they're not always Bridgewater State, most of them usually are. But yeah, I'd say every semester. So we typically do a summer, fall, and then a sort of winter, spring group.
Gotcha. And to confirm, those are the undergraduate interns. So not to say undergrad and
Yeah,
the
those are
PT
all.
interns. Okay.
Yep. So our clinical education students, that's a whole different sort of platform and a whole different um, specialty area. We also do take clinical students from probably about 6 different schools at this point.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that process. A student say I might consider doing PT and wanting to kind of get some experience in the belt. What do you look for from a hiring manager point of view? What kind of is that a mode of student that you typically want to hire?
We want students who want to be here. So students that are interested in the field, students that ask questions, appropriate questions, students that are professional, that, so our typical process is we have students send in a resume, and then we'll have them have a phone call with Ed Yeadon, who is our undergraduate internship sort of manager. So he'll have a call with them to talk about what the internship is and the expectations we would have out of our interns. And then if the intern's still interested, then we have them come in and shadow, usually for about 2 hours, so that they can get a feel for the clinic. And then if they do their internship, those 2 hours would count towards their internship. But it also gives us a feeling for, is this the right environment for them as well? We are a healthcare facility, so even though it's fun and it's casual, there still has to be a level of professionalism there, where you're dressed appropriately and you're asking appropriate questions, and not kind of overstepping with patients. We have patients in our facilities. So we do that shadowing, and then if the intern liked it and we felt like the intern was a great fit, that's when we would then offer a position to them, and then we figure out the hours from there. So that's a sort of step process that we go through. And a lot of our interns are applying to PT or OT school. You have to have so many hours of observation in a clinic to do that. So they're building up those hours so that they can apply to school.
That's awesome. You talk about professionalism. Share with us more. What do you mean by professional attire? What is it like? Or some students come in like, it is a gym or it is a
Mhm.
PT. What do you mean by professionalism? Can you share a bit more about what is from a PTU point of view?
Yeah, I mean, you're not wearing kind of casual clothes. We do like we wear sport tech. Some people wear more sport tech sort of pants too, and that's fine. You don't want to see someone in wrinkled khakis. We don't want to see someone in ripped jeans. We don't want your underwear hanging out the back of your sport tech pants. We don't want you walking around the gym with a gallon of water. Put it over there. You can drink your gallon of water, just you're not going to walk around with it like it's a gym. And and just sometimes occasionally we'll get someone that just socially doesn't pick up cues. They might walk up to a patient and say, "Oh, how did you, what?" It's ask something very personal that wasn't the appropriate time to ask that. So it's just like those general social cues, and we talk to students about that kind of stuff ahead of time, so it's not like a surprise. We teach them a little bit about HIPAA, and what you see in this gym is not to be repeated outside of this gym.
Mhm.
It's still again, it's a medical facility. So even though it feels like, and I keep using the word gym, even though it feels like that, and it feels like, oh yeah, I saw my uncle's cousin's neighbor, you can't go tell someone that you saw your uncle's cousin's neighbor on the table, doing some sort of stretch or getting some sort of treatment. So we talk about those sort of pieces of professionalism and in healthcare.
That's great. Thank you, Kelly, for sharing that. Curious from your perspective, what makes PTU unique in terms of your internship program than some of the other, local, facility and clinics that are also having similar
Sure.
opportunity?
Well, I think, obviously it's hard to say. The intern's not with me at all times. But our motto is learn, rehab, recover. So learn is the first piece of that. We're always trying to educate. So it's less that you're there as you need to be working, because there are some facilities where you do your internship and you are just working, 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 working. We don't do that as much. We do try and get people working and involved and helping us with exercises and helping us set up patients. Um, but a big part of it is learning. So if we're teaching you some exercises to do with a student, patient,
Patient. Yeah.
you need to know why you're doing those. What are those exercises working? What's the rationale behind it? What are some cues? Like if they're doing it wrong, how do I correct them? So education is a massive part of our internship that we do with our students.
And you touched upon it a little bit earlier, but I'd love for you to kind of share with students who might be thinking about that. or doing an internship with you, is there a particular timeline that you prefer for student who I'm thinking about fall? When should I reach out to you for exploring opportunity, or spring, or even summer? Is there a particular timeline that you suggest students to consider?
Yeah, so the sooner the better. We always, it's hard to get people in last minute. So if people are ahead of the mark by about 6 months, that's really helpful for us. 3 months at a minimum. Occasionally we can accommodate students last minute, but because we typically have a wait list for our internship positions, sometimes we don't have a spot for people.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It is in line with many industry as well. 3 to 6 months before you start your term, it's really a peak time for students to apply for opportunity, especially for even for summer, which most of the time is more competitive. We always encourage students to apply early, even 6 months plus, 6 months to a
Hmm.
year ahead in some industry as well. So glad to hear that you guys are in line with that. There were a few questions before we jump in. I would love to kind of say, Kelly, if looking back from your whole journey, be from BSU or from Northeastern's BSU to now, what advice do you have for students as they're thinking about PT but not sure if it's PT or
Hmm.
not? What advice
Yeah,
do you have for them?
I would definitely get in for some shadowing. Whether it's at a hospital or an outpatient clinic, talk to some therapists. So talk to an occupational therapist, talk to a physical therapist, get in the environment to ensure, it's a massive financial and long-term kind of commitment to move forward with those schools even before you apply, because you're trying to get all these prereqs done and you're trying to get all these hours done. So you don't want to waste your time if it's not something that you're like living and breathing. Like, you want to be in an environment and feel like, wow, like I could do this for the next 30 years, because typically that's what's going to happen, at least 30 years. But the fantastic thing about physical therapy, I will say this, is there are so many different environments that you can work in. So outpatient gym, hospitals, in people's homes, outside of people's homes, and in schools, in education, in research. So if you're someone that kind of gets bored with things on a regular basis, that's really helpful too, because you can just kind of pick up and move on and go into a different kind of realm while kind of still working under your physical therapy license
That's
or
great.
occupational therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the advice, Kelly. One other follow up on that. People think that PT, you only have PT internship or even opportunity. Can you share about maybe what other type of opportunity? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to do PT, but I really want to work locally and intern in
Mhm.
a smaller environment and be able to try out different things. Are there any options? Are you only hire PT and that's it?
Yeah, so we have PT, we have occupational therapy, we have strength and conditioning, and then we are working with the internship office, as you know, and trying to build like more of a small business style intern, where we would get some help with marketing or social media, our website, our email campaigns. All of that right now is mostly managed by me, and I could be doing a much better job with an intern. So we're hoping to at some point have an intern for something like that as well.
Fantastic, folks. For still in the room, if you're not interested in PT, but you still really want to gain experiences working directly with business owner, learning from someone like Kelly, consider PTU as a great option for opportunity, not just in PT and OT and any other that Kelly just mentioned, but obviously opportunity in communications and even mentioned social media could be a good option for you to explore. So check it out. Meanwhile, let's jump into a few questions. I saw the few in the chat, so let's dive right in. Sam asked a question in terms of starting a business. What is the most important part of the process? Is it hiring? Is it
Mm,
hiring? Is it good people? Is it logistic? What did you
yeah.
kind of start that process?
Um, oh my God. What's the most important? What did I tackle first? Kind of the structure of what type of business I wanted to open. When you open a business, there's lots of different things you can choose. So the structure of the business was kind of important to me. And then again, kind of wrote out, well, if it's successful, this is what I want it to look like. And then kind of building towards that and growing towards that. And there's big thing people always say. It's super common. They say hire slow and fire fast. So really, it is definitely kind of who you're hiring. How, do they fit with your core values of your company? Are they only going to make you better? Are they only going to kind of extend what you're doing further? So definitely the hiring process was a massively important piece of it. We have some fantastic people here. We are really, really lucky to have them. So again, yeah, definitely hiring is probably was the biggest challenge, but I think that'll always
Absolutely.
be, yeah.
And I will mention for students in the room who are interested in starting a business, there are many U.S. Small Business Administration offices in the region, or even across the country, whichever state you want decided to move to start your own business in. So I would highly encourage you to utilize their
Yeah, the
resources to take
SBA is
advantage.
great.
Yep, SBA, it's always helpful for that. And some other option you can also students can also consider is look into some of the local libraries. Sometimes they have like, how to start a small business, how to start this, how do you work on this? And they might have resources available in many of the local libraries that offering some of those support and resources. And at Bridgewater State University, we certainly have the Center for Entrepreneurship that you can take advantage of while you're in school, and you can talk to colleagues over in that space to explore those options. So just want to mention a few resources while we're on that topic as well. And let's jump into the next question. When working with patients, how do you structure your physical therapy sessions? Maybe get a glimpse of,
Yeah.
you know,
So
how do you do that?
when someone comes in, new patient comes in, you do an evaluation, which is sort of an assessment. So if they're for shoulder, back, knee, hip, whatever, there's stuff that you learn in school that likely is contributing. So the biggest part of your assessment is really the history and what we would kind of say is the interview process, I guess, and talking to the patient, how they got hurt, what their pain feels like, what their impairments are. And that starts to build a story in your head, in terms of like, this is probably what's wrong. And then we're doing a hands-on assessment of flexibility, mobility, joint mobility, strength, obviously, balance, coordination, whatever the impairments might be, and we're doing a full assessment. And then we're kind of comparing that against norms for someone who is similar age, similar impairments. And that allows us to figure out, all right, yeah, well, it's tendonitis and you're 18 years old, and this is probably going to feel better in 4 to 6 weeks, based off your injury and the level of a tendonitis that you have. So it's all stuff you kind of learn in school that really guides and structures your sessions. And then what we're doing in physical therapy and the actual treatments is addressing the impairments that we found. So whether it is mobility or flexibility or strength or coordination or balance, we're picking exercises and modalities, maybe hands-on modalities that are actually going to affect those impairments.
That's great. And one of the questions was coming that's similar to that. In that whole entire journey, does the intern have the opportunity to kind of be involved or shadow or observe any all part of the treatment plan?
Yeah, so typically not the initial evaluation because we don't know the patient yet. So we don't know, how is this story going to go? Is this going to be appropriate for the intern to sit in on? That's something more of our physical therapy students might be involved in. The intern wouldn't be involved in that initial visit, but they would be involved in potentially exercises, reassessments along the way, and in the daily treatments. Once we get to know the patient and can kind of know the appropriateness of the involvement of the intern, that's when they would be involved in the rehab process.
Gotcha. And I will jump into this question first. Do you miss doing hands-on PT work that you used to provide?
Um, yes and no. So I certainly miss the simplicity of just focusing on one patient and really just being able to put all of my knowledge into that one scenario going on. But I know that is no longer an option for me because I've tried it. And it doesn't go well because there's so many other things happening, whether it's the patient asking about the business or other therapists or rehab aides or my phone going off or just my brain thinking, oh, I gotta make sure I do this other thing. It's not really fair to the patients anymore if I were to be in there treating. But I definitely do miss that piece of it. I miss return to sport. That was all, I mean, that's what my business is built around, the youth athlete. So I miss that. Like I'll go into the clinic and I'll see people doing like really fun exercise. I'm like, oh my God. I miss that. That was really exciting for me, but I'm really proud that I'm able to help a lot more people by building a business where we have multiple therapists who can also have that enjoyment with the patients. So,
Gotcha. So I know that you're involved with so many other things too, like being on the alumni associations, and obviously serving on the advisory board for the Ricardi College of Business. How do you truly juggle all these priorities? And one of the questions there is kind of managing the. I wouldn't even still manage. How do you juggle your work life and personal life and any other engagement that you have?
yeah. Um, That's a tough, I don't do it well. You're always missing out on something. So to be very realistic with it, if I'm 10 out of 10 knocking it out of the park at work, I'm failing as a mom or a wife or a daughter. And vice versa. If I'm killing it as a mom, like, wow, I'm ignoring something that's happening at work. I mean, there's been plenty of people that will talk on that issue. It is a constant struggle. Um, but you just have to kind of be okay with that and know that, it's always going to be a struggle. There's nothing I'm going to figure out that's, oh, wow, look how balanced I am. It's not happening. I can't juggle. I'm just doing the best I can in the moment that I'm in.
Absolutely. And I always say it's okay to not to be okay, but it's understanding that, you're focusing on things that are working well for you, right? Working that are working for you and your family and so forth. So let's see any other questions folks have at the moment.
I saw Kaylee asked a question there. Hi, Kaylee. If you were to enter at your facility, would be able to shadow and observe all the opportunities that you provide. Are you talking about me personally or like the
I
clinic?
think it's the intern, right? Like the
Yeah.
intern, the question that I mentioned earlier about the intern will be involved with the overall treatment plan or experience. I think that was the question that I was
Oh,
referring
okay.
to.
Okay.
But that's okay,
Yeah.
Kaylee. If you want to add anything, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask.
But yeah, so again, like the interns mostly are not involved in an initial evaluation process, and then they're involved as much as their sort of success as an intern allows us to be. We've had some interns that are right there with us back when I was still treating. I might have them right with me, and everything I did, they were doing.
Hmm.
It just really depends on how involved that intern wants to be too. You could sit and be a wallflower and just observe. Um, we don't like people to do that, but certainly if someone were doing that, it's a possibility. But we like people to be involved or as involved as they can be.
Gotcha. That's great. I think Kaylee was just mentioning that the clinic you had mentioned that you had multiple different sessions
Oh
that you
yeah. Oh,
offer. Can we
definitely.
observe all of them?
Yeah, so definitely. We have some interns that they're like, I don't know if I want to do PT or OT, so they observe both. They can observe the strength and conditioning, we do laser sessions, we do myofascial, they can observe anything that is important to them. It's definitely something that we can set up to ensure that they observe it while they're doing their internship with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
So there's a question comes in, say, if you were to go look back on your own kind of being a business owner experience, what timeline would you recommend for your younger self to start your business? Would
Mm,
that be the same timeline or earlier or later? And
no,
also, go ahead.
yeah.
Let's start with that first.
Um, Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would have done it sooner because, like I said, if you asked me 10 years ago, it wasn't my pain points weren't high enough for me to make the leap. I think it had to get difficult enough and frustrating enough for me to finally want to work as hard as it requires you to work for a business. I think everybody's different, so I think there are some people that come right out of PT school and they start it. I think there are some people that, they're 20 years in and they start it. It's going to be different for everyone. When I reached out to some of those moms to see, would you recommend it or would you do it? Some people were like, your kids are too young, wait till they're older. Some people are like, oh, the sooner you start, the better. Everybody has a different opinion. So it's really whatever is going to work for you. When your pain points are high enough to just know that no matter what time, it's going to be an absolute mess and be extremely difficult. There's no one window where it's like, oh, this is when it'll be its easiest. I think it's always just gonna be difficult.
Absolutely. I always say there's no magic 8 ball somewhere. I wish we can just have it all the time and just be like, this is the right time. Let's just ask the magic 8 ball and then
Mm.
we can make a determinations of that, right? So we'll give some time for additional question that comes in. So colleagues and students in the room, feel free to keep popping in questions that you have come up with. I'd love to learn a bit about from your perspective, what's the industry going? I would
Ooh.
kind of curious from your perspective to see uh, what are some of the things that are kind of keeping you up at night that are related to the industry?
Okay. Um, some cool directions that the industry is going is AI, right? We have a lot of like robotic stuff that's helping us, technology that uses a camera that can know if you're doing the exercises wrong or right. People are nervous it's going to take our job away. It's not, because that's sort of like more the fluff of what physical therapy is. It's not the bread and butter. It's not the assessment that computers are necessarily going to be able to do. So that's a cool direction that things are going. The thing that keeps me up at night is reimbursement for physical therapy. I opened my business in 2016, and Medicare has cut reimbursement every single year since I've been in operation. So I make less money from Medicare now than I did 8 years ago, 9 years ago. That keeps me up at night. There's nobody really fighting a very strong battle to increase reimbursement rates from insurance companies. There are some insurance companies that pay the same amount they paid that's 15 years ago. I don't know any person that would stay in a job for 15 years without ever getting a raise. But that's what we're doing with some of these insurance companies. I'm a huge advocate for physical therapy. Reimbursement, I do a lot on that front. So that's definitely one of the things that keeps me up at night. If the trend continues for reimbursement to slowly decline as it is, with the really strong increase in expenses, we're going to hit a crossroads in 5 to 10 years that's going to be extremely detrimental to private practice in physical therapy. And that section of our profession will slowly die out if we do not make a change with insurance companies.
Gotta love all the billings, right? The insurance and the expense and the overall cost of all these with the inflation comes in. So kudos and appreciate all the good work there as well. Let's see any other questions here.
Thank you.
And obviously AI is a big thing. We can go into this topic for so many hours of do you foresee in the future that AI will replace your therapist and be on the floor with the patients?
No, no, nothing beats that interaction. I definitely think there is a large part of like the traditional therapeutic exercise that may get absorbed by some AI, but in terms of the assessment piece and the adjustments required in the moment and the different things outside of traditional like therapeutic exercise, which is a massive part of what we do, is not really something that I see AI taking over. I do see it cutting down on our documentation time. So anytime you see a PT, you're also going to see a laptop, because if we don't write it down, insurance doesn't pay us for it. So we're hoping that AI kind of picks up and helps us in that sense as well, so that there's less of us like sitting there typing while we're talking to you.
That's great. Well, I think we are almost to the end of time. I just saw that a bunch of shout out to you for excellent work that happening in your facility and your space and all the good work happening in your organizations. I want to take a moment to say thank you for you taking the time in your busy schedule with so many other commitment. We still say yes to us and doing this session with us to share your experiences and your journey with our students and our community. So we always love our Bridgewater State Bears, continue to shine in many spaces, and we look forward to having you, seeing you again on campus in the near future. And student in the room, thank you for joining us, and colleague, thank you for jumping onto today's call. On behalf of the university, Callie, thank you for your work, and kudos to all the excellent work that you continue to help support the university as well. With that said, thank you very much.
Thank you
take
so
care,
much.
everybody.
I really appreciate that. And thank you for your kind words.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.